Okay, I want to describe a little bit more practically how I see the path of energy working. First of all, I said it won't work by us moving the critical mass of number of people. It will be working, if it works at all, which is an open question at the moment, by us moving the critical mass of energy. Why is that a different thing? Because if we count people, we kind of count the individual amounts or contributions of consciousness and awareness, and like conscious willpower. And that is a nutshell on the ocean of energy that is present in all of us, and that is present, I could say, around or independently from the individual persons. So that these are good news, because we might figure out a way in the future, or might have already figured out a way, how to tap into the relevant resources or relevant masses of energy without having to say, hey, all my followers keep believing what I believe in, etc. So this is a good thing, because it allows us to be in an unconditioned way promoting freedom for all of us. Like, you may go your path and it might be completely a different God and a different direction than my path. However, your path is not a danger, because by you choosing your path instead of my one isn't in danger in terms of, oh, then not enough people are following me. So that's a good thing. And what we know, and that's something that I shared in the very first video of the series, what we know from trauma research is everything that is in a collapse, in numbness, in fatigue, in emptiness, in the so-called seemingly nothingness, there are the superpowers. To be honest, I think that's a very beautiful parallel that we see in quantum physics. Like, the nothing is the state of the highest energy instead of the lack of energy. It's almost like matter or form is a symptom of a lack of energy instead of us being there in a condensed energy form. It's rather like us being weakened where we are form, or where we have boundaries or any sense of skin. So it is us getting a taste of the amount of energy of dark matter that is in myself present, because I am traumatized, because I am collapsed, or traumatized / collapsed. If I sense my inner non-sensation, if I embody my disembodiment in a new way, and again, I won't go into detail here, because with the wording that I choose here, I think it's too abstract in order to really harm, in terms of, oh fuck, this works and I don't know how to stop the train. So, but if it is us opening our eyes for our inner hiddenness and collapse, and in that way invisibility, then we get a taste of the density and forces, the cosmic forces, the global impact and the global ocean of energy underneath the nutshells of our conscious willpower, personal stuff, neocortex, rational thinking, cultural conditioning, etc. And that is where we have to embed ourselves, or where we have to base ourselves in. So it basically is for everybody being interested in global regulation. It is give up the illusion of being a person, of being an individual, and not in terms of, oh, I'm sitting down and meditating on it and I say, yes, that sounds true. It is you embodying that, which is whole another thing. It's whole another thing. It's a thing of rewiring your nervous system with hard workout every day for years, at least for years. And workout is not a workout. It's an energetic, conscious, purposeful, disciplined visit in those realms that are always the realms of the outlaws. The insanity, the death, the danger, the trauma, the wounding, the feelings that you don't want to feel. Everything that's damaged, everything that's unofficial, everything that is hidden in the shadows of our collective. That's something that you will have to meet there and kind of, and that is why I think the path of energy is a tantric thing. It's a tantric path. It's kind of, you have to make love with your shadows first. It's like you have to run into the disruption of your functioning, of your getting along. It's me looking for a good life where everything is under control. It's just, that's just the nicest corner of a horrific prison. So and our instincts know that. Our instincts know a prison is a prison. There are no instincts going for short-visioned egoism. Like instincts take your hand and lead you towards your death, towards your trauma, because they do not want you to suffer from that by dissociating from that. They want you to go through. And at the moment we are just going into the trauma and then we get stuck. So that is why going into collapsed fields and not collapsing, facing the collapse, is the masterpiece or the mastery that I'm interested in, and that I think is the most useful skill for the upcoming years, because we can be talking about trauma therapy and trauma healing and therapy and all of that and healing stuff in terms of therapy, but then it's more and more in an increasing way over the course of the next years such a privileged island. I mean, then everybody is allowed to heal at least a little bit from their own childhood. Who can afford a therapist? Who can afford a therapist? Who can afford a therapist at the moment? It's less than 1 or 2% of all people in mankind at the moment, and times will become tougher. I'm not interested in our current narrative around, oh, this is a very hard time. It has always been hard, and it has always been harder than we experienced that we could have that we can handle, because that is why we kept collapsing when we are confronted with the outer world. So our upcoming years will be super tough, and I'm not interested in being in that way unresponsible that I say, hey, just jump into your shadow and this is precisely how you're doing that. But at the same time, I don't want to be the one saying, oh, this has to be a very safe setting. There are no safe settings around that are not increasingly expensive, increasingly rare, and increasingly privileged. Yeah, so I believe in therapeutic principles, but they have to be adapted to the mass of energy and the mass of people, if the mass of people is interested in that. There's just no other way of making use of those wise and powerful principles in a way that is at the same time responsible for or showing up for we are aware of the mass of people who are suffering. So it's not coming from information, it's coming from energy. If I learn in my individual nervous system to tap into my inner collapse and sensing that my inner collapse is brimming with energy instead of just collapsed and dead and nothing and boring, and something that I oversee or overlook, I again do not know which word is the right one at the moment. However, if I tap into the inner taste of brimming cosmic healing, changing, transformative death and life forces, shamanic initiating forces in my collapse, I get a taste of that being present in the collective around as well, and I get a taste of how to repeat my individual healing curve in the collective as well. That is why nobody can help saving the world who cannot save himself or herself, or who cannot save himself or herself. For example, if he or she takes action for the globe because he or she thinks I'm a sinner and I have to sacrifice something of my privileges so that others at least do not starve today, but maybe tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, woohoo. That is me believing in myself being a walking problem and a walking sinner. And that is me not being able to love myself, not being able to be aware of who I am inside. And that is why I, at the end of the game, will only have added another and maybe a little bit nicer layer of confusion to the whole mess. So that is why it is a challenge, because we are at the moment definitely destroying this planet. And at the same time, it's strictly forbidden for all of us to believe in humans are a problem. They produce problems for themselves and every other living being and this planet around, yes. And they are not a problem. They are desperately trying, providing the true solution, and they are stuck due to confusion, due to trauma, due to collapse in their nervous system, which is something that they have inherited over the course of the last thousands of years. So that's the thing we have to get clear about. And it's not about, okay, so I'm good, I'm a walking present. Are you a walking present? Is your energy, is your existence enriching this planet? Is Mother Earth delighted every time you take a step on her? Is she doing that? The only question is, are you aware of that? That is what I mean with embodiment. Is the air that you breathe, that you inhale right now, delighted by you inhaling it? Yes or no? I don't want another cheap layer of us being spiritual freaks saying, oh, yay, I'm a walking contribution to this planet, and all of us beating ourselves still up for what? For our cellulite? For our makeup? For how we lost control in our last fight with our girlfriend? We have to choose. Are you in the big game? Then challenge the thing that you still believe in you being a problem, instead of nodding to something intelligent in a stupid way, or me. Really self-dignity, self-responsibility for your self-love, that's a super hard workout. And I have never ever met somebody who's truly living up to this art. But everybody nods, because I'm surrounding myself with intelligent people. That's worth nothing. Our intelligence is the most it's the most efficient way of staying stupid when it comes to efficiency. So it is basically us adding, and by that for the course of the next years, overemphasizing the path of energy. And the path of energy is, I travel into my collapse and I travel back from my collapse. Like I experience my collapse without collapsing. I could say I experience suffering without suffering from the suffering. It's a very paradox intervention. It is me dying my death without dying. It is me allowing my so-called negative emotions and welcoming them with open arms instead of fighting them in that moment. And what I see then is something like the individual, your individual healing of your individual trauma can be translated to the collective nervous system, because to be honest, I do not experience mankind as anything else but as a collective nervous system. So to me, like, everything is a nervous system. If you know your nervous system, if you know the trauma landscape of your own individual nervous system, you know how the whole thing is wired. There is no difference. It's not even a translation. It's just seeing the same thing there as well. And then what I see is, and I also talked about that, I think, in at least one more video, but it's still abstract. I see something like us. I see my working terms are, if people are interested in that, there are dancers on the bridge. And they are doing something like, alone or with others, in many different formats that are possible, they are doing something like shaking events. So my working terms for the moment are shaking events and dancers on the bridge. Just for you to know, these are terms that I'm making up in order to navigate in language, as long as it's kind of, let's say, needed or in the field, navigating in words at all. And And shaking events are something that I consider to be even more effective and sustainable than what several spiritual teachers, I think, at the moment are doing. That they are doing something like group meditations that are focused in the mind of the people on a certain topic. Like, for example, prayers for, of course, areas or countries who are suffering from a catastrophe or something like that. I think shaking events are more effective and even more sustainable than those meditative processes because they tap into the path of energy instead of the path of the mind, which is still, I think the resources of the mind, even though we do not tap into the true potential of the human mind at the moment, it's still something that we know better than the potential of free flow of energy, because free flow of energy is something that's then immediately blocked by our discontainment for energy moving through our nervous systems. That is why I think us training embodiment like crazy, embodying intensity and in like ecstasy and deep down regulation, tolerating true relaxation without collapsing, all of those training soft skills in our nervous system, then being fed into the collective nervous system, that's gold, that's medicine. So shaking events are like group meditation processes being dedicated towards a certain topic of suffering that's present anywhere on earth. And by using the path of energy, by being a whole body shaking organism, I would say every person who's then standing there and shaking is a vibrating acupuncture needle for the collective field. And by consciously connecting to a field of suffering or trauma or collapse, which is all the same, we can reconnect the collapsed field with the information of how to vibrate. So that's something I think is very powerful, and I will show a diagram about that in a moment. The other thing that is powerful around shaking events is that it provides us with an embodied experience instead of just our blah blah mind, that we are connected with everything around, and that we in that way consciously choose to connect with everything around. And that in itself is such a powerful thing. At the moment, so much around dance and embodiment and body work is about, oh, that's just for me, and that's for my body, and that's for my feeling myself. And it's super interesting and timely to define our bodies as the very first thing that is handed over, which is, by the way, I mean, it is handed over. Our bodies are solidly sold to every layer of capitalism. So what I call the most being me, myself, and just me is the least me being myself. But that's a footnote. There's one more thing that I wanted to mention, and it's not on my mind at the moment. However, okay, I will go into the diagram that I drew, and I hope you can read it. So we have a certain topic, let's say child abuse. And we have dancers on the bridge. Oh, now I realize what I wanted to mention before. We have the dancers on the bridge, and they are the solution, because they know from their individual learning curve, and that is maybe that they have been abused as a child, by the way. So that's not always happening to the others, not at all. By dancing back and forth, they are bringing the energy. It's like they are going in their individual nervous system is present the information of self-healing of the system. And this information is something as their courage or their intention or their resource. And they start traveling on the bridge to the topic of trauma voluntarily. They do not have to be interested in child abuse if it's not messing their own individual life up at the moment. However, they choose to do that. Why soever? Maybe because love is a resilient thing in us humans. So we are connecting with our whole body vibration to this topic. And it's almost like us bringing vibrational energy in a cup into this collapsed field. And then in the collapsed field, we can face that in a titrated way. We can face that step by step and take a little bit of this brimming collapsed energy and dance all the way back over the bridge into the topic, into the realm, like handing it over into the dynamics of self-healing. So handing it over means the dancer somewhere here and somewhere here, initiation to death. This is what I've written here. The initiation to death is like the dancer is handed over himself or herself. It's not, oh, I'm saving the world. It's, oh, I'm killed on the way. And that is why I think us being okay with global extinction makes it less likely that we get globally extincted by the consequences of our actions and non-actions. But because it's like in Elizabeth Kübler-Ross, like research around dying people, it's like there is a deep, deep peace. There is a deep okayness with death, getting closer and being our own death, also our personal death, and being in so much peace with death might lead to miracle healing. So again, I think this is a big game and there might be a global miracle healing, but us hoping, okay, I'm okay with my death, so miracle healing, can you please come now because I'm still afraid in a collapsed way, that won't work. So that is why this is the whole game. And it's not easy because everything easy is already done. So it will challenge you because otherwise you're just missing what I'm talking about. And it challenges me literally to death. That is what I'm talking about. I'm not somewhere else. But I am deeply aware of this challenge is a challenge, period. Nobody here is a heroine. Nobody here is a hero. We are all dancers on the bridge. And that's interesting in the solution that is freed from the matrix of the problem is stopping believing in the solution is just here. That's still a polarized world. That's still a world of separation. You are adding something to the problem. We are adding something to the solution. These are still two instead of one, like instead of embodied non-duality. So the dancer on the bridge is the solution. The freedom on the way is the solution. It's not about us preventing trauma. It's not about us running from trauma. It's not about us healing trauma. It's about us staying free no matter how many wounds are on our path. That is dancing back and forth, dancing back and forth. The freedom of choice, of pendulation between collapse and freedom, between bliss and suffering. That is the matrix of solution beyond needing a solution. We are not needing a solution. We are not needing anything. And by the way, it's not a taboo that we might fail, and that would also be okay. I can talk more about how the dancer on the bridge will need to be initiated into death. I see, to be honest, I see for those fields of death that are around the fields of collapse, the experiences of death, I think they're a whole, let's say, global modern job description or global modern new profession should come up over the course of the next years. And that's something like death shamans who know about the path and who transfer also to the political and the global awareness of how deeply we are messed up, how deeply this trauma has us in its hand, day and night and day and night, and just all of us. I think it's very important that we start using those, and maybe also offering those resources that come from shamanism and mysticism and yeah, dying people, outlaws, people who are living their existence in shadowy parts, becoming deeply familiar with those ones who could not afford entertaining themselves in the so-called superficial layers of getting along. We need those people as our teachers. Yeah. So one more thing, it's just something that I want to have been put into this video as well, and then on that more. And that's a little bit more about the dancer on the bridge's individual process, because it's somehow like sacrificing being an individual, because it has never been one, but that's another story. And first of all, it steps from the individual into the collective, and it does that by conscious choice. And then the dancer on the bridge, he or she surrenders without collapse to being handed over to the process, like life force moving in me, instincts moving in me. My instincts are moving me into the trauma collapse X, that is where I wanted to, how I wanted to dedicate my shaking, or my shaking event to. And then all of that with this charge of my own courage and my own trauma stuff gets a kind of automatic healing curve, self-healing curve into the topic that is here, is self-healing itself here. And it puts the dancer on the bridge in a way bigger, more uplifted and more open and more powerful, a freer version of herself or himself than how we have started. And that is why doing this, like sacrificing my personality, sacrificing my individual stuff, dying without dying for something that's seemingly not so much in my personal suffering landscape, is the most egoistic and most contributing thing that I can choose to do with my lifetime. I mean, yeah, if we wouldn't have come that far in terms of collective trauma and cultural messiness, the best thing that we would do with our lifetime is just loving each other, loving existence to death, being blissed out with gratitude and joy, and knowing deeply how much we are wanted and loved and wonderful. But the second best thing is left for this era, which is deeply messed up in the first place. And that is, in my current research, a few terms and a few working theses that I am busy with at the moment are those ones that I have shared in those 3 videos until now. And yeah, so that's my take on that, seemingly about information, but more about me moving energy in terms of words, which is basically, at the end of the day, again the same, one and the same.